I didn't expect the fluorescent lights to feel like a kind of honesty. But at 2:17 in the morning, standing behind the counter of a 24-hour convenience store on the edge of a suburb no one remembers the name of, everything looks exactly like what it is. The chips are too bright. The floor is scuffed in all the same places. The hum of the refrigerators never stops. And I am here, scanning a box of cereal with one hand, mid-yawn with the other, because this is what my life has become. The store is empty. It usually is at this hour. Sometimes we get the after-bar crowd around one, stumbling in for energy drinks and regret. Sometimes a trucker pulls off the highway for coffee and directions. But by 2, it's just us. Me and the silence. Me and the slow song playing on the radio. Something old, something I don't know the words to, but have heard enough times that it feels like mine. I set the cereal down. Jasper is across from me, leaning against the far counter near the coffee station, sipping from paper cup. Black coffee. Always black. He's sketching something on the back of a receipt, his pen moving in lazy, confident strokes. I don't know what he's drawing. He never shows me unless I ask, and I've learned not to ask too often. There's something about the way he holds his work close, like it's a language he's still deciding whether to translate. We've been working the night shift together for 6 weeks now. 6 weeks of overlapping hours, shared silence, and the kind of small talk that doesn't mean anything until suddenly it does. I know he drinks his coffee black. I know he hums under his breath when he thinks no one is listening. I know he showed up 3 weeks after I started, and I thought he'd be gone by now. People don't usually stay long at a place like this. But Jasper is still here, and so am I. I didn't plan to still be here either. This job was supposed to be temporary. A placeholder. Something to fill the hours while I figured out what came next. I took a break from school 8 months ago. Burned out is what I told people, though that didn't quite cover it. The truth was messier than that. The truth was that I'd spent 2 years studying music, pouring everything I had into something I thought I loved, and then one day I woke up and couldn't remember why. I couldn't sing anymore. Not the way I used to. Every note felt like a lie. So I stopped. I left. And I ended up here, scanning boxes of cereal at 2 in the morning, which felt like the most honest thing I'd done in months. Jasper glances up from his drawing. His eyes catch mine for half a second before he looks back down. He does that sometimes, like he's checking to see if I'm still there. I wonder if he knows I do the same thing. I pick up another item from the counter. A bag of gummy bears. Someone left it earlier and never came back for it. I scan it just to hear the beep, just to feel like I'm doing something. The radio shifts into another song. This one is slower, sadder. The kind of song that makes you think about things you'd rather not. Jasper sets his pen down. He stretches, rolling his shoulders back, and I catch the edge of a tattoo on his forearm. Something floral, something I've never asked about. He picks up his coffee, takes a sip, and then, without looking at me, he says, "You always draw with your left hand?" I blink. It takes me a second to realize he's not talking about himself. He's talking to me. Or maybe he's not. Maybe he's just saying it out loud because the silence felt too heavy. But then he glances over, and there's this faint smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth, and I realize he's waiting for an answer. "I don't draw," I say. He tilts his head slightly. "You're left-handed." I look down at my hand, still holding the scanner. I am left-handed. I've never thought about it as something worth noticing. "Yeah," I say. "So?" He shrugs, turning back to his sketch. "Just wondered if you ever made anything with it." I don't know what to say to that. The truth is I used to make things. Songs. Melodies. Lyrics scribbled in notebooks I don't open anymore. But that feels like a different version of me, someone I'm not sure I can reach anymore. So I don't say anything. I just watch him draw, his left hand moving across the paper like it's the most natural thing in the world. He looks up again, and this time he holds my gaze a little longer. Only when I want it to feel real, he says, I'm not sure what he means by that. I'm not sure if he's talking about drawing or something else entirely. But the way he says it, quiet, deliberate, like he's offering me a piece of something he doesn't usually share, it hits me somewhere I didn't expect. I reach for a gum wrapper on the counter. One of those tiny slips of paper that comes with the kind of gum no one actually chews anymore. I smooth it out and grab a pen from the cup near the register. I write the sentence down, only when I want it to feel real. I don't know why. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But it feels important, like something I need to remember. Jasper watches me, and I think he's going to ask what I'm doing. But he doesn't. He just takes another sip of his coffee and goes back to his drawing. And I stand there, holding a gum wrapper with someone else's words written on it, wondering when this job stopped feeling like a placeholder and started feeling like something I wasn't ready to name. The song on the radio fades out. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. Outside, the parking lot is empty except for our cars, parked side by side under a street lamp that flickers every few seconds. Inside, the store is still. The kind of still that makes you notice things. The way Jasper taps his pen against the counter in rhythm with nothing. The way his hair falls across his forehead when he leans forward. The way the space between us feels like it's shrinking even though neither of us has moved. I look at the gum wrapper again. Then I fold it carefully and slip it into my pocket. Jasper finishes his coffee and crushes the cup in his hand. He tosses it into the trash behind him without looking, and it lands perfectly. He glances at me. That same faint smirk still there. You gonna stand there all night, or are you actually gonna stock something? I laugh. It's quiet, barely there, but it's real. Yeah, I say. I'm on it, but I don't move. Not yet. Because for some reason, standing here in the cold white light of a convenience store at 2:17 in the morning, next to someone I didn't expect to know, feels like the only place I want to be. I took this job because it required nothing of me. No small talk with professors who wanted to know why I'd stopped showing up to rehearsals. No carefully worded emails from my parents asking when I planned to go back. No running into people from my old life who still thought of me as the kid who could sing, who had potential, who was going somewhere. Here, no one knew me. No one expected anything. I clocked in, I scanned items, I restocked shelves in the dead hours when the world felt like it had forgotten itself. And then I went home. It was exactly what I needed. Empty. Simple. A job that didn't ask questions. I've been doing it for 3 weeks when Jasper showed up. I remember the night he started. Our manager, Derek, a man in his 50s who only appeared long enough to approve time-off requests and complain about inventory, walked him through the basics during the tail end of my shift. "This is Aiden," Derek said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "He'll show you the rest." Jasper looked at me. I looked back. He was wearing a black jacket too heavy for the season, boots that looked like they'd walked through a dozen cities, and an expression that gave nothing away. His hair was dark, a little too long, falling into his eyes in a way that seemed intentional. He had ink crawling up both forearms, images I couldn't quite make out in the fluorescent glare. He looked like someone who'd spent a lot of time being misunderstood and had stopped trying to correct people. I nodded. He nodded back. Derek left, and that was it. Jasper was part of the night shift now. For the first few days, we barely spoke. He learned the register quickly, figured out the inventory system on his own, never asked for help unless he absolutely had to. He moved through the store like he'd been there for years, like he understood the rhythm of the place without needing to be told. I appreciated that. It meant I didn't have to explain things. It meant I could keep to myself. But Jasper wasn't the kind of person you could ignore forever. He noticed things. Small things. The way I always restocked the candy aisle first because it was the easiest. The way I turned the radio up when a song I liked came on, even though I never sang along. The way I avoided the back room when the overhead light flickered because something about it made my chest feel tight. He never mentioned any of it. But I could tell he saw. One night, about a week after he started, he brought a thermos of coffee from home. He poured himself a cup, then slid another across the counter toward me without asking if I wanted one. I stared at it for a second, then picked it up. It was good. Better than the burnt sludge we sold in the store. I told him so. He shrugged. Easier to get through the night if you're not drinking something that tastes like regret. I almost smiled. Yeah, I said. Fair. After that, it became a routine. Jasper brought coffee. I drank it. We didn't talk much, but the silence started to feel less like distance and more like understanding. Somewhere around the 3rd week, we started playing a game. I don't remember who started it. Maybe him. Maybe me. But one of us asked, "What's the saddest thing you've ever bought at 3 a.m.?" Jasper thought about it, then said, "A single birthday candle. No cake, just the candle." I didn't ask why. He didn't offer. My answer was a notebook I never wrote in. I bought it thinking I'd start writing songs again. I carried it around for 2 months. Never opened it. Jasper nodded, like that made perfect sense. Sometimes the saddest part is knowing you're not ready yet. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything, but I thought about it for the rest of the shift. The game became a thing we did, a way to fill the silence without forcing conversation. We'd ask questions that didn't quite make sense, and we'd answer them honestly, or as honestly as we could manage. What's the worst advice you've ever taken? What's a place you'll never go back to? What's a song you can't listen to anymore? Jasper never pushed, never pried, but he listened in a way that made me feel like my answers mattered. And slowly, without meaning to, I started talking more. About the job, about the strange people who wandered in at 4 in the morning, about the way the store felt different, depending on what was playing on the radio. I didn't talk about school. I didn't talk about music, but I talked. And Jasper stayed. That was the part one couldn't figure out. People didn't stay at jobs like this. They took the overnight shift because they were desperate, or hiding, or killing time until something better came along. I knew why I was here. I was running from something I didn't know how to face. But Jasper never seemed like he was running. He seemed like he'd chosen this, like he wanted to be here. I didn't understand it, but I also didn't want him to leave, because somewhere in those long, quiet hours, the night shift stopped feeling like a place I was hiding. It started feeling like a place I belonged, and Jasper was the reason why. I just didn't know how to tell him that yet. The storm came in fast on a Thursday night, the kind that turns the sky purple before it breaks open. We'd been restocking the coolers when the first crack of thunder shook the building. Jasper glanced toward the windows. I followed his gaze. The parking lot was already slick with rain, the street lamps casting warped reflections across the asphalt. Another crack, louder this time, and then the lights went out. The store plunged into darkness. Complete. Absolute. The hum of the refrigerators died. The radio cut mid-song. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of rain hammering against the roof and my own breathing, too loud in my ears. Then I heard Jasper's voice, calm and unhurried. "You good?" "Yeah," I said, though I wasn't sure. I couldn't see him, couldn't see anything. I reached out instinctively, my hand finding the edge of the counter. "Emergency lights," he said. "Give it a second." He was right. A few seconds later, 2 dim lights flickered on near the exits, casting the store in a pale, ghostly glow. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see shapes. Shadows. Jasper, standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, looking completely unbothered. He walked toward the back room, and I heard him rummaging through something. He came back with 2 flashlights, the kind Derek kept in the storage closet for situations exactly like this. He handed one to me. Our fingers brushed, just for a second, but I felt it. "Guess we're off the clock until the power comes back," he said. I clicked the flashlight on, sweeping it across the aisles. Everything looked different in the dark, unfamiliar, like a place I'd never been. "So what do we do?" Jasper shrugged. "Wait out." He walked behind the counter and sat down on the floor, his back against the cabinets. He set his flashlight beside him, angled up so it lit his face from below like something out of an old campfire story. He looked at me, waiting. I hesitated, then sat down beside him. Not too close. Close enough. The rain didn't let up. If anything, it got louder. We sat there in the half-dark. The beam of my flashlight pointed at the ceiling, and for a while neither of us said anything. It should have felt awkward. It didn't. Then Jasper said, "Tell me something you've never told anyone who works here." I glanced at him. "That's a weird question." He smiled barely. "That's not an answer." I thought about it. The truth was, I hadn't told anyone who worked here much of anything. Derek didn't care. The day shift people didn't know I existed. And Jasper knew pieces, but not the whole picture. I exhaled slowly, the sound swallowed by the rain. "I used to be a music major," I said. "Quit halfway through my second year." He didn't react with surprise. Didn't ask why, at least not right away. He just nodded, like he'd already suspected. "What made you quit?" I didn't know how to answer that. The real reason felt too big, too complicated to fit into words. So I went with something simpler. I stopped believing I was good enough. Jasper was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Where you stopped believing it mattered." I looked at him. The flashlight cast shadows across his face, made his eyes darker, harder to read. "Maybe," I said. He leaned his head back against the cabinet, staring up at the ceiling. "I get that. I used to think I had to be the best at something for it to mean anything. Spent years chasing that. Then I realized the things that actually mattered didn't care how good I was. They just cared that I showed up. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. But I thought about it. Thought about all the ways I'd stop showing up for the things I used to love. Jasper started humming. Soft at first, almost under his breath. A melody I didn't recognize. It was strange, a little dissonant, but beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. I closed my eyes and let it fill the space between us. When he stopped, I opened my eyes. "That one of yours?" I asked. He glanced at me. That same faint smirk. "You used to write songs." I thought I'd hear one. My throat tightened. "I haven't written anything in a long time." He didn't push, just nodded like he understood. But I could feel the weight of his words. The quiet expectation. Not pressure, just belief. The power came back an hour later. The lights flickered on, the refrigerators groaned back to life, and the radio picked up mid-chorus of some pop song I didn't care about. We stood up, brushed ourselves off, and went back to work like nothing had happened. But when our shift ended, Jasper walked me to my car. He didn't usually do that. The rain had stopped, leaving the parking lot slick and shining under the street lamps. I unlocked my door, opened it, and then paused. Jasper stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name. I should have gotten in the car, should have said goodnight, but I didn't move, and neither did he. The silence stretched between us, not empty, but full. A question that neither of us knew how to ask. And for the first time since I'd started working here, I felt something other than numb. I felt awake. Something shifted after that night. Not all at once. Not in any way I could point to and say, this is when it changed. But the shift started to feel different. Lighter somehow. Like we'd crossed some invisible line in the parking lot and couldn't go back, even if we wanted to. Jasper started bringing snacks. Not just coffee anymore, but the kind of things you'd share with someone you actually knew. A bag of chips he'd split down the middle. Chocolate he'd break into pieces and leave on the counter between us. Once he brought homemade cookies that tasted like cardamom and honey, and when I asked where he got them, he just said his grandmother's recipe, like that explained everything. I started doing the same, bringing things I thought he'd like. An energy bar I'd found that tasted like actual food. A bottle of iced tea because I noticed he got tired of coffee around 4 in the morning. Small things. Things that didn't mean anything except they did. We made up names for the regulars. The guy who came in every night at 1:30 for cigarettes and nothing else became the philosopher because he always looked like he was contemplating the nature of existence. The woman who bought the same lottery ticket every week became the optimist. The college kid who stumbled in at 3 a.m. for instant noodles became the survivor. It was stupid. It made the nights easier. And Jasper kept drawing. He'd leave little doodles on receipts, tucked under the register or folded into my jacket pocket when I wasn't looking. Tiny sketches. A coffee cup with steam rising in spirals. A bird perched on a wire. Once a flower I didn't recognize, delicate and strange, with my name written underneath in his careful handwriting. I kept every single one. I didn't tell him that, but I kept them in a box under my bed, and sometimes when I couldn't sleep, I'd take them out and look at them, trying to understand what he saw when he looked at the world. Trying to understand what he saw when he looked at me. One night, I realized I was humming. It happened without thinking. I was restocking the bread aisle, and a song came on the radio. Something old, something that reminded me of high school. And I started humming along, just under my breath. Nothing intentional. But then I heard it, my own voice. And I stopped, frozen, because I hadn't done that in months. Jasper looked up from the counter. He didn't say anything, just watched me with that quiet intensity he had, like he was memorizing the moment. I went back to stocking shelves, but my hands were shaking. That night, when I got home, I opened my phone and pulled up the Notes app. I hadn't looked at it in so long, I'd forgotten what was in there. Pages and pages of half-finished lyrics. Ideas I'd abandoned. Melodies I'd never recorded. I scrolled through them, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of failure. I felt something else, something that almost felt like hope. I started writing again. Not much, just a line here and there, a verse that didn't go anywhere, a chorus that didn't have a song yet. But it was something. and it was mine. The next week, Jasper brought a cassette recorder to work. He sat on the counter during a lull, the small black device looking out of place among the candy bars and lottery tickets. I stared at it. He didn't explain, just looked at me and said, "Play something." I laughed. It came out nervous, disbelieving. "I'm not playing anything." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, patient. "Why not?" "Because I don't do that anymore. You were humming last week." "That's different." "How?" I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, but I didn't want to say it out loud. Because humming didn't count. Humming was private. Playing something, singing something, that was real. That was vulnerable. That was the part of me I'd locked away because it hurt too much to keep reaching for it. Jasper waited. He didn't push. Didn't argue. Just stood there, looking at me like he already knew I'd say yes eventually. And I did. I don't know why. Maybe because it was 2 in the morning and no one else was there. Maybe because the store felt like the only place in the world where I could be honest. Maybe because Jasper looked at me like my voice mattered, even when I didn't believe it myself. I picked up the recorder. My hand was shaking again. I pressed record, and then I sang. It was quiet. So quiet it almost didn't count. A melody I'd written years ago, back when music felt like breathing. The lyrics were simple. Something about searching for a place that felt like home. I stumbled over a line, forgot the words halfway through, but I kept going. And when it ended, I stopped the tape and set the recorder down, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Jasper didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at me the way you'd look at something rare. Something you didn't want to forget. Then he said, "That was real." I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. My eyes stung. So I just nodded. And Jasper smiled. Not his usual smirk. A real smile. The kind that made me realize I wasn't just working the night shift anymore. I was falling. Jasper called out sick on a Tuesday. I didn't find out until I showed up for my shift, and Derek mentioned it in passing, barely looking up from his clipboard. "Jasper won't be in tonight. You'll be solo." I nodded like it didn't matter, like it was just another shift. But the moment Derek left, the store felt wrong. Too quiet. Too empty. I'd worked alone before, plenty of times before Jasper started, but this was different. This was noticing his absence like a missing tooth. Something I couldn't stop touching with my tongue. The night dragged. Every task took twice as long because I kept expecting him to appear, to make some comment that would make me almost smile, to hum something under his breath that I pretend not to hear. But he didn't come, and the hours stretched out, endless and hollow. I restocked the shelves. I cleaned the coffee station. I helped the regulars, the philosopher, the survivor, and made up what Jasper would have said about them if he'd been there. But it wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. Around 3 in the morning, during a lull, I found myself standing behind the counter, pulling out the receipts I'd saved. All of them. The ones with Jasper's drawings. I've been carrying them in my jacket pocket for weeks, folded carefully, and now I spread them out on the counter like tarot cards. A coffee cup. A bird. That strange flower with my name underneath. And then I found one I'd forgotten about. A sketch of a person singing. The lines were loose, impressionistic, but I recognized myself. The tilt of my head. The way I held my shoulders. And underneath, in Jasper's handwriting, "Stay a while." I stared at it until my eyes burned. Stay a while. Not stay forever. Not stay with me. Just stay a while. Like he knew I was someone who left things. Like he was asking me not to. Like maybe he'd been afraid I would disappear the same way everyone else in his life probably had. I folded the receipt carefully and put it back in my pocket. Then I gathered the rest and put them away too. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 2 words. Couldn't stop wondering if he'd meant them the way I wanted him to mean them. When my shift ended, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at my phone. I had Jasper's number. We'd exchanged them weeks ago for scheduling purposes, though we'd never actually used them. I typed out a message. Deleted it. Typed another one. Deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote, "You okay?" I hit send before I could change my mind. He didn't respond. I drove home. I tried to sleep. I couldn't. I kept thinking about the sketch. About his voice in the dark during the storm. About the way he'd looked at me after I sang, like I'd given him something he didn't know he needed. The next morning, I was still awake. I hadn't slept at all, and I realized I didn't want to wait until the next shift to see him. I didn't want to pretend this was just about work. I didn't want to keep hiding from the thing that had been building between us for weeks. So I got up. I got dressed. I stopped at the corner store and bought soup, the kind that actually tasted like food, and then I looked up Jasper's address. He'd written it down once for a package delivery mix-up. I kept the paper. I drove to his apartment building, my heart pounding the entire way. I had no plan, no script. I just knew I needed to see him. I climbed the stairs to the third floor and found his door. Number 12. I stood there for a full minute, my hand raised to knock, wondering if this was a mistake, wondering if I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Then I knocked. Footsteps. A pause. The door opened. Jasper stood there, looking surprised. His hair was messy. His shirt was half-buttoned. He looked tired but not sick, just tired in the way people get when they've been thinking too much. His eyes softened when he saw me. "Aiden," he said. I held up the soup like an offering. I didn't know who else I'd want to talk to. He stared at me for a moment, and I watched something shift in his expression. Something vulnerable. Something real. He stepped aside, opening the door wider. "I was afraid if you showed up," he said quietly. "I never want you to leave." My breath caught. I looked at him, standing there in his half-buttoned shirt, looking at me like I was the answer to a question he'd been too afraid to ask. And I realized that all the words I'd been trying to find, all the things I'd been trying to say, came down to this moment. This choice. "Then don't make me," I said. Jasper's eyes held mine. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing my wrist, and the touch was so gentle it made my chest ache. He pulled me inside. The door closed behind us. And for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We didn't talk about what we were. After that morning at his apartment, things just continued. We went back to work. We shared our shifts. We brought each other coffee and snacks, and made up stories about the regulars. But now there was something else underneath it all. A current running between us that we both felt but didn't name. Jasper would brush his hand against mine when passing me something. I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. And sometimes, at the end of a shift, we'd sit in his car or mine in the parking lot and just talk until the sun came up about everything and nothing, until one of us had to leave. It felt fragile, like something I could break if I held it too tightly. And then I got the call. It came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was sleeping. I almost didn't answer, but I saw the name on the screen, Professor Chun, my old music theory instructor, and something made me pick up. Her voice was warm, familiar. "Aiden, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I sat up in bed, suddenly awake. No, it's fine." She told me about a showcase, a spring performance the department was putting together for current and former students. One night, one song, a chance to perform again, to be part of something I'd walked away from. "I'd love to have you involved," she said. "I always thought you had something special. Still do." I didn't know what to say. The idea of standing on a stage again made my stomach turn. But there was something else too, something that felt like possibility. I told her I'd think about it. When I hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I put it face down on the nightstand and tried to go back to sleep. I couldn't. That night at work, I didn't mention the call. I thought about it the entire shift, but every time I opened my mouth to say something, the words wouldn't come. Jasper noticed. He always noticed, but he didn't push. It wasn't until 3 days later that he found out. I left my phone on the counter, and it lit up with a reminder notification. "Call Professor Chinbakri. Showcase." Jasper glanced at it, then at me. "What's that about?" he asked. I could have lied, could have brushed it off, but I was tired of hiding. So I told him about the call, about the showcase, about the fact that I've been trying to decide whether to say no. Jasper set down the box he was holding. "Why would you say no?" "Because I'm not ready." He looked at me for a long moment, that same expression he'd had when I sang for him, like he was seeing something I couldn't. He used to sing like it was the only thing that made sense. I shook my head. "That was a long time ago." "Was it?" He stepped closer. "Because I heard you sing a few weeks ago, and it sounded like it still made sense to you." I didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe I did, but it scared me too much to say it out loud. Because he was right. When I sang for him, it had felt like breathing, like coming home. But doing it on a stage, in front of people who used to know me, who used to expect things from me, that was different. Jasper reached out and touched my wrist, his fingers gentle. You don't have to do it for them. Do it for you. I looked at him, at the way he was standing there, believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. And I realized that maybe this wasn't just about music. Maybe it was about whether I was brave enough to stop running, to show up for something that mattered. I called Professor Chin the next day and told her yes. The weeks leading up to the showcase were strange. I practiced in my car during the day, windows up, voice cracking on notes I used to hit easily. I rewrote lyrics. I second-guessed everything. And Jasper was there through all of it, steady and certain, reminding me why I'd said yes in the first place. The night of the showcase, I stood backstage, hands shaking, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The theater was small but full. I could hear the crowd murmuring on the other side of the curtain. And then I walked out into the lights. I found Jasper in the back row. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching me with that quiet intensity. And suddenly, nothing else mattered. I sang the song I'd started writing after that night with a cassette recorder. The one about searching for home. It wasn't perfect. My voice cracked once. I forgot a word and had to improvise. But it was real, and it was mine. When I finished, the applause felt distant. All I could see was Jasper, smiling at me like I'd just done something impossible. After we walked through the city, it had rained earlier, and the streets smelled clean and new. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. I stopped under a street lamp, my heart still racing from the performance. I didn't take this job to fall in love, I said. Jasper stopped beside me. He looked at me for a moment, then smiled. That smile that meant everything. That it's a good thing love doesn't care about schedules. And standing there under the street lamp, with the city quiet around us, I kissed him. It felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. We went back to the store. Not because we had to. Our shift didn't start for another 2 hours. But after the showcase, after the kiss, after walking through the city like we'd discovered something the rest of the world had forgotten about, we ended up in the parking lot. And then we ended up inside. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The same lights that had witnessed everything. Every quiet conversation, every moment of doubt, every time I looked at Jasper and felt something I didn't have words for yet. Jasper walked behind the counter and started making coffee, even though we didn't need it. I watched him move through the familiar routine. It struck me how much had changed since that first night he'd walked in. How much I'd changed. I pulled out my phone and opened my music app. The song I performed was already uploaded. Professor Chin had recorded all the showcases. I pressed play, and my voice filled the empty store. Jasper looked up, surprised, then smiled. Playing your own music now? He asked. That's very rock star of you. I laughed. Just wanted to hear what it sounded like. Outside my own head, he poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one across the counter to me. And I listened for a moment. To the lyrics about searching for home. To the melody that had come to me in pieces during those long night shifts. To the voice that I'd thought I'd lost. It sounds like I finally figured out what I was looking for, I said. Jasper's eyes met mine. And what was that? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked around the counter and stood beside him. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. Close enough that I didn't have to say the words out loud for him to understand. But I said them anyway. This. You. All of it. He set his coffee down and reached for my hand. His fingers laced through mine, and it felt as natural as breathing. We stood there in the fluorescent light, in the store that had somehow become the most important place in my life, and I realized that home wasn't a place I'd been searching for. It was a person I'd found when I wasn't looking. The door chimed. A customer walked in, a middle-aged man in a rumpled jacket, looking half asleep. He wandered toward the energy drinks, grabbed one, and came to the counter. Jasper rang him up while I stepped aside. The man paid, barely making eye contact, and left without a word. The door chimed again, and then it was just us. You know, Jasper said, leaning against the counter, we never did finish restocking the bread aisle from last week. I raised an eyebrow. Are you actually suggesting we do work right now? He shrugged, that familiar smirk appearing. We're here. Might as well. So we did. We restocked shelves and organized inventory and did all the mundane tasks that had once felt like killing time. But now it felt different. Now it felt like building something. Like choosing to show up, even when we didn't have to. Jasper pulled out a receipt and started sketching while I finished the last row of bread. I watched him from the corner of my eye, the way his left hand moved across the paper, confident and certain. When he was done, he folded it and handed it to me. I unfolded it. It was a drawing of the two of us standing behind the counter, surrounded by tiny details, coffee cups, candy bars, the radio in the background. And at the bottom, he'd written, 2:17 a.m. I looked at him. What's this? He smiled. A reminder of where we started. I folded the receipt carefully and put it in my pocket with all the others. Then I pulled him close and kissed him again, softer this time, unhurried. Because we had time now. We had all the time in the world. When we pulled apart, the radio was playing something I'd never heard before. A song with a slow, winding melody that felt like it had been written for moments exactly like this. Jasper started humming along, and without thinking, I joined him. Our voices blended together in the empty store, imperfect but real. And I realized that this was what I'd been missing all along. Not perfection, not certainty, just someone to share the quiet moments with. Someone who saw me and didn't look away. A new receipt printed from the register, unprompted. Probably a glitch. Jasper tore it off and looked at it, then laughed. He showed it to me. It was blank except for the timestamp at the bottom. 2:17 a.m. I shook my head, smiling. Of course. Jasper pulled out his pen and wrote on the fresh receipt. Meet me outside at 2:17 a.m. He folded it and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I already know where you'll be, I said. He leaned in close, his forehead resting against mine. Good, because I'm not going anywhere, and neither was I. We stayed there until our shift officially started, and then we worked through the night the way we always had. But everything was different now. The silences felt warmer. The conversations felt deeper. And every time I looked at Jasper, I saw my future reflected back at me. When dawn started to break through the windows, painting the store in shades of gold and amber, I thought about all the receipts in my pocket, all the tiny pieces of our story, written in doodles and coffee stains and half-finished thoughts. We didn't plan to fall in love at a convenience store at 2 in the morning. But sometimes the best things are the ones you never see coming. And sometimes home is just a person who stays.